Welcome to Jimmy's Jobs of the Future. In this episode, I interview Jean Phillipe Courtois. He joined Microsoft in 1984 as one of the first employees outside the US, and now his only boss is CEO Satya Nadella himself. It is an incredible journey that started out by selling software out the back of a car. We talk about his personal journey, the foundation he has created to inspire young entrepreneurs, and the wider work being done to develop technology careers in the UK. We filmed this episode in partnership with Microsoft above their bustling flagship store in Oxford Circus. It was a great experience and an even better episode. JP, welcome to Jimmy's Jobs of the Future.
Thank you so much, Jimmy.
Tell us, what's your role at Microsoft?
So at Microsoft, I'm working on an exciting piece of work called National Transformation Partnerships, which consists in partnering with governments, large enterprise, on really adding on top of our technology innovation, a couple of very important attributes to society and economy. One is skilling for meaningful jobs in tech, which I think it would be an interesting discussion together.
Yeah.
The other one is cybersecurity, is a big concern across the world. And the third one is really sustainability and societal impact through technology. And I'm also very involved in terms of coaching some of our talents. I'm actually passionate about a school of thought called Positive Leadership. I'm also doing a podcast like you, Jimmy. And the third arena is a new initiative I launched 6 months ago called Entrepreneurship for Positive Impact, which is about all these new wave entrepreneurs who want to change the world for good.
And you're on the global leadership team,
Yep.
You're the only one that's based outside of the US.
That's correct.
What does that involve?
Interesting question. I've been privileged, lucky, passionate, or crazy enough, you could say, to work for Microsoft for 38 years. Yes. And I've been living in Paris. I've been also living a few years in the US, in Washington States. And I would say it's interesting because in a way, when I'm doing those Microsoft Teams meetings with the senior leadership team, which I'm going to do actually tomorrow night, SLT. Of course, the meeting will happen in the night here in Paris, when it's day and early morning in Redmond. I think it's an interesting perspective because having my feet on the ground in Europe and traveling the world for the company as well, I'm always agitating a little bit the global and local dimension of a company like Microsoft, which of course is a global company by design. But I think having a voice there is quite important.
Yeah. And talk us through, what was your first job at Microsoft 38 years ago?
Wow. Yeah. So it was back in 1984. I joined a company and my first job was actually a sales engineer. What is that? Well, when I joined Microsoft, first of all, to get perspective, it was a startup. The company was like 1,000 people globally. I joined the French subsidiary in a very small suburb called Les Ulis, not that fancy or exciting. And there were 10 of us, so I was employee number 11. And my job was basically to take my little Renault 11 car with a huge compact portable. Maybe you are born, probably you remember, because depending generation, they don't know what I'm talking about. Those were like almost sewing machines, that you had on your shoulders, 12 kilos. And I was going everywhere in the cities in France to recruit some partners to go and start selling the very first software Microsoft was building. At the time, Microsoft was actually the developer of MS-DOS, which is an ancestor to Windows, the first operating system for the PC computer. And we're also selling development tools for developers. And eventually we get into the applications business with spreadsheets, multiple, you don't even know this product, which was our first spreadsheet before Excel.
Right.
And and then the rest is history. And so my job was to recruit partners, to train them, to support them, to educate them on what software was about, because today it's obvious, but in 1984, that was a nation industry. It was nothing. I mean, little industry, very small.
And how did you explain what software was to somebody that hadn't come across computers?
It's an excellent question because, to tell you the truth, I had to convince sometimes people coming from, I would tell you, from the porn industry. And they thought that they would make a lot of money into that new sexy software PC industry. So the way I would do that is actually to demo the products. Because talking about software, this word in France in particular as well, was not even, you would not translate it. It was logiciel, okay? Finally, after a few years, we got a word. And I told them at the end of the day, it's about really getting information at your fingertips. you think about it, back in the mid-80s, there was no microcomputers. I mean, it was just the first out with the Apple II. Yes. My friend Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. So it's a very different machine than a Macintosh. It was an open machine at the time. Apple was open.
Yeah.
And I worked for a startup in France. So this is where I got in love actually with software. And because of that, I thought that, wow, something big is going to happen. Because if you can enable people in small businesses, in anywhere, in schools, in communities, to manage information, data, worlds, content, games, whatever, by their own, it's like the ultimate empowerment of people.
Yeah.
So that got in my mind, that got in my blood either way, and that's the reason why I joined Microsoft.
And there's a Microsoft folklore story that I was being told before, and I don't know if it's true, but in selling those computers out the back of the Clio, that you were actually doing it with Bill Gates at one stage. Is that true?
I mean, did I meet with Bill? Absolutely. I've been actually with Bill in many country visits across the world for many years when Bill was the CEO of the company at the time, because we have 3 CEOs. And it's been pretty amazing moments in my life to share time with Bill, to think, not just to talk about software, of course. We did talk a lot about software opportunities and the way we could expand, the way we could actually enable more scenarios to the economies, societies, but also understanding from Bill's perspective on the world, which was pretty unique. Yes.
And what have you've literally sort of grown up through with the company in 38 years. What are some of the different roles that you've held at different points?
So I must say, I've been someone mostly, I would say, working in the field, because when you work in a large global company like Microsoft, you are, I'm kind of black and white, a bit binary. You are either working in the headquarters, with Microsoft, it's called Redmond. It's in Washington State, close to Seattle, on the Northwest Pacific coast, or you're working in the field, meaning on the ground, facing customers. So the roles I had were basically starting with that sales engineer role I was talking about. Then very quickly, I was given a responsibility to actually open the markets in Spain, in Portugal, in Greece, in the Netherlands. So kind of getting my feet into international world, which I was not necessarily prepared for, which was wonderful, got me excited to get our products ready for that. Then I worked actually in Redmond headquarters. I was the head of all the business planning for the company. I was the head of also our sales marketing tools for the field and the strategy planning. And then I came back. I was offered a wonderful job, which was to run Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Yeah. Then I expanded to international and then global. That's in a nutshell what I did, and a few other things in the middle.
And what have been the biggest changes? I mean, you talk about sort of selling out the Clio to begin with, and now we sit on top of the Regent Street store in one of those sort of like prominent shopping streets in the world. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. So what kind of changes have you seen along the way? I mean, there must be so many, but what are the highlights?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly recall so many chapters of that story, but I would say a couple of highlights. I mean, number one, obviously, is when we open our windows to the world with Windows. So when Windows emerged, you have to think at the time, actually, the PC was basically a bunch of text and characters on your screen, right? That was not a very user-friendly experience. And of course, you had the Macintosh from Apple on the market coming up, and we came up with Windows. So the very first, I would say, turning point was this Windows 95 launch, which was pretty amazing, and in a way that was starting point to get actually. The vast majority of people, citizens, users in the world getting excited about the PC phenomenon. That was a big of democratization of the PCs. Windows basically on the PCs, because it got massive and it got into a pretty big excitement. A couple other inflection points, obviously, is only as a company when we went 7-8 years ago to take a fast forward to become a cloud first, AI first company. So moving in a way from a pure core software development company, which has done software forever, into a company building cloud services and platforms. So in essence, all the services you use today, either as a consumer, as citizens, or as a business user, on a hyperscale cloud infrastructure in the world. And it enables us, of course, to do a lot more, to achieve more, and to empower many people on the planet to achieve much more.
Yeah. And one of the questions we ask on the show is, if you were 22 in 2022, where would you be sort of starting your career, and so on? What excites you most about the economy now? And if you were a young person, where would you be heading?
I think if I were a young person, I'm actually doing that still. I'm doing that as well today. I would get involved in a way or another, either as an entrepreneur, probably. That's something I would love to do if I was 22 years old, in building basically a tech for good company.
Yeah.
So basically combining my passions for tech on one hand with the societal impact. And understanding the way I could leverage all the innovation coming from cloud, AI, blockchain, and more to have a positive impact in the world.
Yeah.
Whether it is climate change, whether it is social inclusion, whether it is human rights. There's so many fields, and I meet with those guys today on the ground in UK. Actually, today I was meeting with a number of them as well, social entrepreneurs and others. And I think that's what I would do if I was 22 years old, Jimmy.
and how do you keep entrepreneurship alive within a company the size of Microsoft?
That's a great question. I think, at least personally in my life, I'm privileged because I've been able to combine my passion within Microsoft and outside of Microsoft. Microsoft, we've been certainly engaging, embracing the startup phenomenon for many years. What we decided to do recently, and I've been kind of leading that work, is to shape an initiative targeting social entrepreneurs and startups that really want to have a positive impact with technology.
Yeah.
And so we built an initiative where we go and select those companies who have a real mantra and North Star in terms of the social impact they want to have in the world. And we come as of course, a global hyperscale company to enable them to scale up, to do a lot more through tech-intensive innovation, and offer them as well the power of ecosystem globally to basically sell their cloud services to the customers, to the public sector across the world, because we've got a huge demand today happening. And then in my personal life, I also created a foundation in my home country in France called Live for Good.
Yeah.
And Live for Good mission is to unleash the potential of youth from all walks of life through social entrepreneurship. So as you can see, I can live my passions either way.
And talk to us a bit about how Paris has changed, and France more generally as well, as a startup nation. Because actually 10 years ago, it wasn't really an option. And I used to joke in number 10 that I would worry about which business leader Emmanuel Macron had over to France that week. But yeah, talk us through how it's changed.
Yeah, I must say there's been a huge shift. And I think the shift has been a mental shift, a mindset shift, which is always the most important in a country. Because in a way, 10 years ago, if you were living in France, if you're a youngster, or, actually being an entrepreneur was not that sexy, was not that exciting. It was like, well, come on, get a job, in the public services.
Yeah.
No, seriously, get a real job, right? And I would say the government, to give him some credit, I think has done a very nice job with a number of enterprises as well, with some investors, to create really a healthy startup ecosystem. I think many people may have heard or not of Station F, which has become actually the largest hub for startups. But beyond that, you had actually a number of successful entrepreneurs that have that been actually building some role models for youth. And we get really a nice flying wheel across the country. And we even see, which is new actually, I think the COVID-19 maybe has helped, some great, very skilled young engineers or business people coming back to France to start a startup in France, and not necessarily go all west to Silicon Valley to do, and some of them did that as well, but actually to build out of France, which is a very new phenomenon.
And why do you think that mindset shift has happened?
I think there's a combination of things. I mean, first of all, there's been a very different narrative about what the enterprise world is all about, because before you become an entrepreneur, you have to relate to the corporate world. The corporate world is a big thing. and I would say, to make it simple, it was a view, obviously, in the country, there's still some of that view, but much less, that the corporate world was not a nice place to go and live. It was, without any values. And it was like those ugly people who make so much profits. And and they are not necessarily, creating any social cohesion for the country and so on and so forth. I think the narrative has changed, and it has changed in a way that is not just because the corporate world, I think, has changed its style as well, but also because the actually youth, but also the education system has evolved, not completely, but has evolved. And the political system as well has been supported by investing real money into creating those ecosystems all across France, not just Paris. Actually, you've got ecosystems down in a few large cities in France. And most of the young people want to become entrepreneurs. Actually, the last data point was last year, there was 1 million companies created in France, 1 million for the first time.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is about self-entrepreneurs or startups, which has never happened before. That's a pretty big turning point. Yeah,
absolutely. And one of the phrases that sometimes gets uttered or is that George W. Bush, the American president, said, "Problem is with the French, they don't have a word for entrepreneur." Is that true?
It's actually a French word, entrepreneur.
That's
a paradox. No comments.
We'll leave that there. And digital careers more broadly as well.
Yes.
Like there's so many opportunities now. One of the reasons we do the podcast is that there's this kind of paradox that it's never been a better time to be starting or shifting your career because there's more options available than ever before. But in a way, that makes it harder as well to actually know where to go. It's not like the 80s where there are more set routes.
Yeah.
So what's your kind of advice to people that are sort of starting their career at Microsoft?
Yeah, I think it's a great and very timely question, Jimmy, because I was, again, spending time today in the UK with our team and with some customers, organizations. If you just take the UK as a country, there's a need for 22 million jobs with digital skills, early entry-level jobs, all the way to the most sophisticated job, 22 million. In terms actually of jobs that needs to be filled, with an IT perspective, you've got 2.6 million jobs needed in the economy now in the UK. So coming back to your question, I think there's different paths to get there. And I think, in our traditional mindset, not just in UK, everywhere in Europe or in the world, we've been always thinking about, okay, I'm going to get a computer science degree. I'm going to study in that prestigious engineering school, this and that, which is all wonderful. And I'm not saying that's not working, that's working. But it's very much an elite system increasingly. And you know well that in many countries in the world, there's a huge problem in terms of funding such studies for the broadest youth, right? Not the one that can afford it. And so what I found out, which is another passion of mine in terms of skillings for tech jobs, is you have some wonderful organizations like Generation UK, which I think you know well, like QA and others. And others I found in France, in the UK, in Germany as well, social enterprise. They are doing a very neat job of screening and talking to the underprivileged youth in the countries. So all those minorities that are not touched at all and who have never been told they would dare think about having a tech job. Never, ever. So they find them, number one, which is not easy because you have not to use the traditional social media stuff. You have to find them where they are. And then you have to build a program, which is typically a 12 weeks kind of boot camps, picking a very well-defined type of role which is available, like data analytics jobs, like first-level cybersecurity jobs, and get them the confidence, the mentorship, the support to get certified with Microsoft support as well. And then they get a job for 80 or 90% of them into one of our partners or one of our customers. So back to your question, I would tell you, and I discussed with one of them, Ibrahim, just before this podcast, and he's a guy who was dreaming of getting into tech, but he never found a way to do it because he never had any financial means to do it. He didn't have the degrees. And he heard word of mouth about Generation. He got screened, he got agreement, and now he's wonderful. And I actually had a chat with his employer in the UK who is like incredibly impressed and excited about Ibrahim and his team because making such a difference. So I think the diversity of skills, the ability to get into a non-conventional learning journey to get tech job is feasible now.
Yeah. And what role does Microsoft have in sort of like going out to reach those places, right? Coming from my background in government, like it's great having all the courses and the careers, but there's almost like a step before that of like, how do you actually reach those individuals? Like, how do you get to them? what is Microsoft's responsibility to do that? Because there'll be plenty of people who say, well, it's not your role to do.
Yeah, so I think as a company, to be honest, I think it all start again stems from our core mission as a company. We use a few words which I deeply believe into. It's not just a marketing slide; it's actually deep. We talk about empowering every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. And as part of that mission, of course, we innovate. Of course, we invest incredibly deeply on technology. We build this hyper-scale cloud infrastructure over the world, including in the UK. But we realize that we have an important mission to accomplish as well, which is to enable an inclusive, sustainable, responsible growth wherever we operate in the world. So it means that when you can do good, if you can do well, while doing good, by adding some of those capabilities. And so with our clients, by the way, it's business. It's not philanthropy, it's real business.
Yeah.
As we talk to some of our key customers in the UK, in the US, anywhere in the world, they are all in needs of finding those diverse talents for IT and tech, as an example. So we decided a couple of years ago to launch a very large initiative called the Global Skills Initiatives, where we've been building, obviously, some learning platforms and assets called that Microsoft Learn, GitHub for developers, LinkedIn, which is part of the Microsoft family as well, of course, with a lot of content, courseware, soft skills too, by the way. And we've been really blending that with some of the partners that I was mentioning as an example before to create some end-to-end journeys and opportunities from skilling to jobs. And I think the more we are targeting in a very laser-focused way, those people who are the most in need, and who could bring, honestly, a fresh breeze of air in many of our companies, I think the best job we'll do for the industry. Because the tech industry has not necessarily done a great job in terms of inclusion.
Yeah. So do you think you can teach entrepreneurship?
Oh, such a great question. I think, it depends on the context. I think when I think about Microsoft as a pretty large company, right? We have like 220,000 people working in the company. As a manager, as a leader, I've always been passionate about the way I could actually have a bunch of entrepreneurs in my team.
Yeah.
Easy to say, hard to do in a large company. And I think to me, it starts from a mindset standpoint. It's all about a mindset you have as a leader in terms of the way you create. First of all, you need to create a climate of trust with your people so that they can actually take risk. They feel safe. They feel supported. And any one of us can make mistakes. Of course, making mistakes all the time is a problem for sure. But if you get a supporting environment where you can actually take a bet, take a risk on a new thing, an initiative, not just business as usual as a company, I found out that in my professional at Microsoft, that pays off a lot. And I've tried to practice that in the limits of that corporate blueprint, I would say. No, in my social life, I mentioned briefly with my foundation, Live for Good, that's what I do. So what we do, we've created a journey of a 9-month journey program where we basically onboard a cohort of 50 young entrepreneurs from 18 years old, 30 years old, from all walks of life, all kind of diversity. And then we've created a curriculum with 3 weeks of campuses, a lot of digital workshop as well, where we teach them two things, basically. One is a mindset called positive leadership mindset, which I'm very passionate about.
Maybe your podcast.
Exactly. And the second thing is actually how to build a positive impact company, startup. And so the key thing, the magic is when you connect those two things together. And I do believe actually that's going to be, I'm an optimist, as you could feel probably. I think it's becoming almost like a mainstream phenomenon, because when you think about the new wave of entrepreneurs here in the UK, the same, in France, I mean, the vast majority of the new generation, they just don't want to be rich and famous.
Yeah.
They truly want to be proud of having an impact in the world. And so they might not be familiar with what the social impact is, by the way, because there's a lot of theory and works and, measurements and and the theory of change, all that stuff. But I'm very passionate about the way you can actually transform some young people who never thought about becoming entrepreneurs in becoming a change maker through their social enterprise. And it's a wonderful journey I've done for the last 6 years in France with 300 entrepreneurs. And it's super exciting to see some of them after a few years, having 30 people, employees in their companies, having an impact on thousands of CO2 tons, basically cut from the planet, creating hundreds of jobs with people with disabilities in the countries. and so on and so forth. And it's all about that entrepreneurship mindset.
And why did you start that foundation?
So I started this foundation with for a very personal reason. I started with my family as I lost my son, Gabriel. And Gabriel was 22 years old, and he had created a website called Live for Good. He created this website when he was 19 years old, when he came back from a trip in Malaysia, where he was helping with an NGO called Habitat for Humanity, building house for people who don't have any means. And so when coming back in France, he decided to create this website to raise some money. And so as a family with my wife and my two daughters, to be honest, it was late 2015, to give us just some perspective on the horizon as a family, we decided to basically to honor the values of my son, because in many ways he was a lot more into enabling others to do more, into particularly supporting people who are much less privileged than my kids are, clearly. And we decided to create Live for Good, to enable youth, again, from all walks of life, to help them changing the world one at a time, even in modest way. And I would say I'm not saying it's not about having a therapy. There has been a wonderful way for family to basically get and live and find in that connect with youth every single day of our lives to get some hope for the future.
When an event like that happens, how do you kind of put yourself back together?
It's hard to tell, Jimmy. It's hard to tell. It's not something you translate easily with words. I think each, as a parent, as a dad, the same with my wife, as a mom, my daughters differently, his brother. I think each one of us has had to find his own way, her own way. I think what matters a lot to us, was to get that family unity, that family deep connection, alignment in basically embarking all together on this new adventure. And this new adventure it's not about creating an enterprise, an NGO and foundation. It's really about all those young people where we could have a little bit of impact on their lives and having a positive impact, which is exactly what my son left us with some personal messages about, giving me lessons about what I should do more in my life.
Yeah. And an amazing legacy to kind of carry on and so on.
It's it's a very particular legacy to carry on. Yes.
How many people how big do you think it could go in terms of?
I'm not Microsoft, obviously, my foundation. Today we are helping 100 young entrepreneurs per year in France. We are working to scale that up to hopefully 250, 300 a year in the next couple of years, which will make us actually the largest social entrepreneurs for youth in the country. And hopefully, because I'm also very much focused on tech, I built a tech platform with that to enable other organizations like Live for Good to do the same at scale. And so that's the next dimension of the impact I can contemplate in the years to come, so that it could go beyond the frontiers of France, because there are wonderful people do the same or similar things in Africa, in Europe, in Asia. And I love, obviously, to connect the dots, to work with them as well, to amplify the impact. So maybe if I come back here on the podcast in 2-3 years, I could share some great news with many more beneficiaries. That's not my dream. That's the plan I'm working on, actually. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have the Prince's Trust here in the UK, which is pretty amazing kind of way of doing it. And the impact is long and it's a great thing to do. How have you found the transition? Because you're doing your podcast and so on, and you're becoming, like, speaking to your team beforehand as well. You're becoming almost a public figure now for Microsoft and so on. How have you found transitioning to that kind of role and almost creating your own voice?
To be honest, Jimmy, I mean, it was about 18 months ago. 18 months ago, I was still running the commercial business of Microsoft globally for Satya Nadella. So all of our subsidiaries, a pretty intense business, every quarter closing numbers. I've done that. I counted, actually. I've been closing 146 quarters in my life. So one day I came to Satya, it was 2 years ago, told Satya, I want to move on. I love this company. I can help. I've been helping it. And I was ready to actually even leave the company. He said, no, please stick around and pick your agenda. And so that's the agenda I share with you, which is wonderful. And it gives me, of course, an incredible privilege, harmony in what I do with Microsoft and outside Microsoft. because when I'm working with social entrepreneurs with Microsoft, I'm also bringing my own kind of experience or deep experience with what I do in my home country.
Yeah.
And I've got, I think, a pretty good understanding actually of those people that I meet everywhere in the world, in where I can help with my persona in a way, because of course I work with a large company in a way as a spokesperson, as someone who can help. I know I can have an impact, and I really want to use that personally as well to magnify that impact wherever I can.
But moving from kind of closing quarters to having a voice and so on, it's like it's a big transition. And
It is a transition. You know, in many ways, as I was running the business, I was already having a voice, because I was in many ways presenting the company in many of the countries where we operate in the world. I've been the executive traveling the most for Microsoft for the last 30 years. I've been opening most of my subsidiaries in the world since the inception. And so in many ways, I've been the one kind of talking about what Microsoft stands for in Kenya, in Mexico, in Korea, in Japan, in UK, in France, in all those countries one by one for years. And so today I'm having, of course, a different role, and I can really align even more my passion without having the anxiety of the numbers coming in or not for the company. And in a way, it's coming almost naturally, I would say. The podcast was something else. It was more of a learning need I had, having a bit of more time, which was wonderful. I guess like you, to learn from others and to learn from amazing people I got to meet, inviting them. And when you invite someone, you need to study. And so I'm trying to do my homework, watching, reading their books, what they've done, and try to enter in those intimate discussions that you know well, to really share common passions on some of the attributes of that positive leadership. And I found that incredibly fulfilling to do that, actually.
If people are going to go and listen to an episode, what's the best one to start with that you've done so far? The one with Satya is very interesting.
Well, Satya is very interesting, but anyway, of course, it's so close to me, my job, Microsoft persona. It's a wonderful one. I think I would point to a couple of others. One is with Kim Cameron. Kim Cameron is one of the godfathers of positive psychology. He's been writing a few famous books for people who've been studying positive psychology. One called Positivity, and it's a wonderful episode where you could see actually not just the science, but actually the approach of that positivity in leadership, what it takes. Another one, which I loved a lot a couple of months ago, with Paul Polman, who is actually in UK, that you know well, the former CEO of Unilever. And Paul used to be a CEO for 10 years in Unilever, you know well, I'm sure.
Yes.
And now he's been also kind of reinventing his life with Imagine and what he does. So we had a wonderful discussion about what it is, what it takes. And anyways, I could point to many other episodes. Another one was recently with Sir Ronald Cohen.
Yes.
Wonderful person, wonderful human.
Godfather of venture capital.
Completely, but also godfather of social innovation bonds, starting in the UK, which he did with working on this problem of the prisons in the UK, and where he could show the social return on investment for the first time to get the financial system to work for social innovation. Anyway, wonderful discussion.
To turn into something that's not as positive, like I mean, one of the interesting things about Microsoft is the way that it's not rebranded in terms of its name, but it's definitely gone through a bit of a curve in terms of the life cycle of a company. Yeah, we're recording this the day after Meta's shed 15% of its workforce, Twitter 50%. Yeah, what's your kind of reflections on that in terms of what those companies need to do and the employees there and the employees that have lost their jobs as well? What are your reflections for them?
I think reflection is, first of all, innovation will keep growing and flowing through the world in terms of technology. So there's kind of a huge need and demand in terms of digitizing the economy and the society. So we should never lose that perspective long term. It's still there. In the meantime, you're right. Of course, the economy everywhere in the world is starting to be shaky, clearly, not to say the most. And I would say it is a reminder to all of us as tech companies that, the trees cannot go all the way to the skies all the time. To be honest, I've been always someone actually very grounded and understanding when it's not just about the value of the company. Of course, it's big time that, in a way, it was like almost, too much and far beyond, in a way, I'm not saying the reality, but the practicality of what we can really provide. So I think with that in mind, I think in all humility, I think tech companies need to be super grounded on where technology can help them most and where they can, of course, enable some growth so that their employees and their people can have fulfilling jobs.
Yeah.
But to me, the task is still huge. Still, actually, we are still probably at 10, 15%, I don't know, of the cloudification of the world.
Yeah.
So we are still early stage on that. But of course, he will take as well different approaches because the world and companies and economies and more, they need actually to do more with less. And I think as tech companies, we need them to do that, to achieve that.
That's really interesting. One of the areas that Microsoft has kind of like segued into over the last sort of 15, 20 years is gaming, and that the Xbox has become a kind of hugely successful side of the company. Where do you see the future of games and entertainment going?
So gaming has been around forever. You know, if I was pointing to your first question, actually, one of the first products I was selling was Flight Simulator. Okay. Yes, in the 80s.
Yeah, I remember.
Just to get some perspective on history. So gaming was there since day one, almost at Microsoft. I would say clearly our gaming vision has evolved for sure from the Xbox to what you call the xCloud, which is basically the ability to enable gaming on any device anywhere where you get connectivity, obviously, because some place in the world you don't get connectivity. You never we should remember that all the time. So that's kind of our North Star, is to build a set of amazing experiences on gaming. And of course, some of that will involve, all the virtual world that we are talking about, metaverse, blah, blah, blah. And you get some of that already happening, by the way, with Minecraft for young kids. People may not recall that Minecraft has grown tremendously and is a wonderful place to actually simulate new skills for kids. As an example, we've created in Minecraft a bunch of skill development for sustainability so that kids in the youngest age can truly understand the impact of environment or building places, cities, or whatever, having sustainability in mind. And you create actually a viral community just doing that in the world of Minecraft. So this is the way we project. Our vision is really to enable that virtuality, that fluidity of gaming on any device anywhere in the world.
And it's interesting you talk about that, because one of the things that I think is interesting about Minecraft is that it is quite a social experience, and a lot of these games are now. And it's very similar to my generation growing up. Sort of just all we did was talk via the internet. But now a lot of people actually talk, playing games, etc. as well. And there's this assumption that we have of kids as well. It's like, well, if they really like something, then it can't be good for them. That's like the sort of like flat side of it. But where do you see the kind of like metaverse going, and how soon do you think we are going to see that?
I know there's a lot of dialogues going on metaverse these days. I think as a company, we are very focused on the industrial metaverse and commercial metaverse happening today. So in other words, we build some technologies on our Azure cloud, we call Mesh as an example, that enables companies to digitize fully their supply chain, digitize their workplaces, and be able truly also to get a lot of more virtual, vibrant conversation with their employees, their avatars, and so on. And more importantly, to get some effectiveness of that industrial metaverse right now. So you've got companies like Unilever as an example, with which we're building digital twins of all their plants across the world to emulate supply chain crises, to emulate, I would say, environmental issues, and simulate and be able to understand implications and change that accordingly. So there's a lot of applications in that field of the commercial world today. And I think there's a lot in the discussion going on the consumers, the e-commerce piece and advertising piece. All good. But right now, the business community needs actually some of those technologies applied to their business needs.
Yeah. And one of the other kind of, you mentioned earlier, the acquisition of LinkedIn, and it's one of the sort of, I think it's a game-changing platform for networks, and we're talking about those young people in terms of trying to find connections, inspiration, and so on. Like, you've built up an incredible kind of followership, almost sort of 90,000 on there. What's kind of, and Microsoft has acquired LinkedIn as well, but it's been quite a hands-off acquisition.
Absolutely.
Generally.
Yes.
And would just love your reflections on what the future of LinkedIn looks like, and that networking side of things. But also, how can you build a kind of good brand on there, and how can people utilize it for the maximum?
Wow, it's a big question too.
Yeah,
I know you're also a great practitioner on LinkedIn as well.
No, I'm a big fan of that.
No, I mean, I love LinkedIn. As you say rightly, I mean, LinkedIn has been managed as really as an enterprise separately from Microsoft in many ways. And it's been wonderful to get to know the team of LinkedIn, to see the work they do. I think first of all, there's a core fundamental of LinkedIn, which is about creating trust between the members of that community, which these days, when you think about the different social media, you should not take for granted. It's a huge asset. It's a huge asset in terms of why people get there, the kind of conversation they're having, and the kind of outcomes they want to drive with that. And so when you think about the outcomes that LinkedIn, I think, is doing a great job of, and expanding the future. Of course, it's about skilling. So we are talking a lot about skilling for jobs. Well, there's a lot going on LinkedIn to get to a learning path, to get to skilling, to get mentorship as well, and eventually to get to jobs, hiring. So get linkage between learning to staffing and jobs. You've got also a lot going on, of course, on the content itself, because there's a lot of, I think, quality content that the platform is nurturing for you, Jimmy, for me, Jean Phillipe, based on who I am, my areas of passion, interest, and connections, to truly a great job bringing to me the right exposure to the right content and networks. I think that the formats they've done, including some advertising formats, which were new to LinkedIn as well, have been well accepted, which is not trivial as well on the social media platform and the way you do that. And I would tell you, I think that depending, of course, on the way you use it, and I see that connection also happening all the time. I'm getting pinged with a lot of people. From young, from young entrepreneurs, from people, of course, looking for a job, quite many. But also from incredible potential partners I never get to meet with, and so you can very quickly get, in a way, very targeted at building a community. I think that resemble you. It's not about being like you, but actually complement you and actually help you to grow and do more. And so in my case, I'm passionate about some of the topics which I express on LinkedIn, different formats, sometimes even a newsletter on positive leadership. It connects to the podcast, and I'm trying to live my passions with the people I connect to all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's really, really interesting. And what's one question that we ask everyone that comes on the show is, what's your favorite book, or a book that's kind of inspired you on your journey?
So one of the books that really inspired me the most the last few years, because I keep referencing to many people, The Second Mountain by David Brooks. This book is really, I don't know if you've read it or not yet, Jimmy. I would advise you to read it. It's a great book. No, it's really a deep reflection on, in a way, the two mountains we have in our lives. And it really depends, of course, where are you in your life at any moment in your life. It's not a question of age only, by the way. He's talking about the first mountain we all climb to, which is home. Let's get up there in terms of big job, in terms of success, in terms of, anyway, anything you project, right? In terms of what maybe at the time it was myself calling success, all right? Clearly. And then there's a point in your life, for whatever reasons, where you say, well, maybe that summit was actually not the summit I was looking for. And I think that book is wonderful in terms of not just framing the discussion, but showing what can happen in your life at a point where you ask yourself the question in your mirror, why? Why I'm here? There's a wonderful quote I'm using all the time in pitch with young people in particular, but not only, with my entrepreneurs who live for good, is this quote from Mark Twain. He said, two most important dates in your life, you may have heard about this quote, is, well, first, of course, the day when you are born, and then the day when you understand why. And I think it's so profound. And the second mountain is about that why. And why you want to get to the second mountain then. And what is the second mountain about? In terms of the fulfilling your real purpose, maybe your real personal mission, as we call it. Some people call it ikigai. I mean, they use tools like ikigai and others to define that. I do believe in that a lot, which is finding yourself why you do stuff. And why you decide to spend time on your podcast, Jimmy, versus going back to
go back to Downing Street.
Downing Street. which may need these days.
If we did
Yeah.
this event again in 2-3 years, or maybe we did it as a LinkedIn audio event,
Yeah.
as I know that's something that's being explored, what does that success of that second mountain look like for Jean Phillipe then?
I think 2 years is kind of almost short term, but you're right. It's good to be to be also grounded in reality. I would say clearly, I would love to learn a lot more through my podcast on really what positive leadership is and getting to know a lot more positive leaders. 2, I would love myself to be able to make emerge many more positive leaders who are kind of the entrepreneurs for the common good in the world. And that's something I'm very fixated on, both with my foundation, but anyway with Microsoft as well, because I've got this incredible platform, which is Microsoft, which is a hyperscale company. And I believe that if we can use that platform of strengths to enable those change makers I was talking about, like those startups with a wonderful set of technologies to have an impact on climate change, on inclusion, or helping out social entrepreneurs doing a great job in the UK, also in the world, to magnify that impact and make a difference at the time where the world needs a lot more positive change makers.
Yeah.
I would be proud. I would feel great about it 2 years from now. Yes.
What a great way to finish. Jean Phillipe, thanks for coming on Jimmy's Jobs of the Future.
Thank you so much for having me, Jimmy. It was a pleasure.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to Jimmy's Jobs. One of the ways we make this show possible is through our various partnerships. If you'd like to partner with us, you'd be joining one of the UK's fastest growing business podcasts, reaching over 40,000 listeners every month. We've helped a wide variety of groups tell their story, from the National Farmers Union right through to the FinTech Alliance. So if you'd like to work with us, just go to www.jobsofthefuture.co. To keep up to date with all Jobs of the Future news, you can follow us across all social media, including our brand new TikTok and YouTube channels.